Boris Johnson has been humiliated by a Sikh Labour politician in Parliament in front of everybody. So this was very interesting. Let's get straight into it. Boris Johnson faces stinging attack over derogatory, racist and Islamophobic remarks, prompting rare applause in Parliament. This is an article from The Independent, and let's get right into it. Labour MP from Slough, Tanmanjeet Singh Dhesi, demanded an apology for comments in a newspaper article that had caused hurt to vulnerable women and resulted in a spike in hate crime. Mr. Johnson declined to apologise, insisting that his remarks had come as part of a strong liberal defence of everybody's right to wear whatever they want. Well, Mr. Johnson, if we have to be racist and call people names to show that you're on their side so that they can wear whatever they want, that's I hate to see what the opposite of that would look like. I really would. These are just excuses. Anyway, carrying on. Mr. Desai, who is a Sikh, wears a turban, said he was used to being on the receiving end of insults like towel head, similar to the divisive language used by Mr. Johnson. Confronting Mr. Johnson at his first session of Prime Minister Question Time, since becoming Prime Minister, Mr. Desai asked, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah, or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or burqa, does that mean it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearances? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and put up with being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. Rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks which have led to a spike in hate crimes? Recalling that Mr. Johnson had assented to Chancellor Sajid Javid's call for an independent investigation into Tory Islamophobia during a televised leadership debate, Mr. Desai went on to ask, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia in the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television? A report earlier this week found that Islamophobic incidents rose by 375% since the period following Mr. Johnson's comment. In the period following Mr. Johnson's comment about veiled women, monitoring group called Talmama said the Daily Graph column was followed by the biggest spike in anti-Muslim hatred in 2018, with 42% of offline Islamophobic incidents reported directly referencing Mr. Johnson or his comments. Saying that he spoke as somebody who is not only proud to have Muslim ancestors, but also related to Sikhs, the Prime Minister told MPs, under this government, we have the most diverse cabinet in the history of the country. Dodging Mr. Desai's demand for an apology, he continued, what we have yet to hear from anywhere in the Labour Party is any hint of apology for the virus of anti-Semitism that is now rampant in their ranks. I would like to hear that. Mr. Desai said the response of Boris Johnson was pathetic and demanded the Prime Minister be held to account for his use of words, use of language. Mr. Desai later went on to the BBC and said, "There are many women out there who wear a burqa or a hijab, and when somebody who is a former mayor of London, a former foreign secretary, no less than the Prime Minister, when someone like that says something, that's why I said it led to such a rise in hate crime," but he still didn't apologise. Leaders of opposition party denounced Boris Johnson's response, calling it appalling. These opposition leaders included Nicola Sturgeon from SNP and Joe Swinson from the Liberal Democrats. They all praised Mr. Desai for his confrontation of Boris Johnson. Even the House Speaker, John Bercow, ticked off MPs for their applause, which is very rare in the House of Commons. He went on to say, "If the House were to want, as a matter of course, to allow clapping by a decision of the House, so be it, but it should not otherwise become a regular practice." Well, I'm glad Mr. Desai called out Boris Johnson on his statements, on his use of words. If somebody in power is calling ladies with burqas, letterboxes, and other such derogatory names, of course it's going to lead to a rise in hate crime, because people who will commit these hate crimes will say, well, the Prime Minister himself thinks these things about these Muslim women, so that gives me a license to do whatever I want, to bully them, to attack them. And that should not be happening, Boris Johnson is in the power of authority now, and whatever he says has consequences, and he should know that. Whatever he says derogatory about other races, other religions, and if that leads to a hate crime, a rise in hate crime, then that's his own fault. That directly relates to what he said. I'll just read them a little portion. A report earlier this week found that Islamophobic incidents rose by 375% in the period following Mr. Johnson's comment about veiled women. See, that's what I mean about consequences. People have the freedom to become violent towards Muslims or any other minority race because they feel that the Prime Minister has given them their blessing to do this kind of stuff. And Boris Johnson needs to be held accountable. He is the Prime Minister now, and he has to watch what he says, respect everybody, tell everybody that, we are one in Britain. Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus have contributed to the UK economy just as much, if not more, than others. And Boris Johnson needs to show appreciation for that. What do you think is going to happen? If the Prime Minister is saying all these horrible things about Muslim women, do you think the Muslim men will sit quiet if somebody attacks their women, their mothers, their daughters, their wives? Do you think they're going to sit back and take this? No, they're going to retaliate, and then you're going to have violence upon violence, and that's just not right. And the fact that Mr. Johnson didn't apologise, well, that says it all. He knows he's in the wrong. He knows what he did. And for him to say, "Oh, well, I said it as part of, liberating these people, allowing them to wear what they want," that's just pathetic. I agree with Mr. Desai. That is pathetic. That is just, that's just wrong. You're the Prime Minister. You're not a child anymore. You're not at school, Mr. Boris Johnson, so stop behaving like you're in school. The findings in this report will say that the rise in hate crime all are referencing Mr. Johnson or his comments, that they're all directly relating to Mr. Boris Johnson. Now, he's an authoritative figure. He needs to respect everybody, stop saying horrible stuff that will lead to violence, and stop causing hatred in the world. And he said, "Oh, I've got ancestors and I've got Muslim friends and all that." Well, that's like saying I'm not homophobic because I've got gay friends, or I don't hate black people because I've got a black friend. That don't make sense, And you're saying that you have the most diverse cabinet. Well, that's not really important. But if that diverse cabinet isn't doing what it should be doing for the people of Britain, you can't fool people anymore with just the phrase diverse cabinet. It's got to mean something, otherwise it's not really important. And so yeah, well done, Mr. Desai, for confronting Boris Johnson. I'm glad that we have got a minority person in the House of Commons who's able to challenge the Prime Minister. We need more of that. We need more people confidently challenging the Prime Minister, not cowering, not bending to the will of the Prime Minister. We need people standing up to the Prime Minister, making him realise that what he's saying has consequences. And that's just not right. And Mr. Desai explained that he himself has been on the receiving end in the past of abuse for wearing a turban. So he knows where he's coming from. He's seen it firsthand. Mr. Boris Johnson has probably never felt a hate crime towards himself because he's white. So he doesn't know how to respond to that pain because he's never felt it before, but others have. So it's a subject that is really close to their heart. And I feel like Mr. Johnson should have apologised, but hey ho, he doesn't really care. And then the cheek of him to turn the tables around, so to speak, and say, well, the Labour Party never apologised for the virus of anti-Semitism. They've never apologised for that. So why should I apologise for what I'm saying? Well, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn was not on trial here, it was you. We can ask Jeremy Corbyn these questions later on. But this was your turn to apologise, show that you're a bigger man, Mr. Boris Johnson. But you didn't. That's just like playground nonsense, as my ex-boss where I used to work, she would say, "Oh, this is playground nonsense." And this is what this is as well. This is playground nonsense. You're being called out on the stuff you said, and you're just turning the tables around and saying, well, where's your apology for anti-Semitism? Where's your apology? And even opposition leaders like Joe Swinson and Nicola Sturgeon, even they said, in fact, Labour leader Joe Swinson actually denounced the Prime Minister's response. She called the response appalling and went on to tell her MPs, an apology is what is needed rather than some kind of justification that there is ever any acceptable excuse for the remarks he made in that column. And even John Bercow, the Speaker, knows that Boris Johnson said some really horrible things, and that's why he allowed the collapse. I mean, it is a very rare occurrence that the Speaker of the House would allow for collapse. He even said, let's not let this become a regular practice. So yeah, Mr. Boris Johnson, you should have apologised at least, even at face value, even if you didn't mean it in your heart. should have just said sorry to make yourself look good. But the fact that you didn't, well, I don't know. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.